question was, why does the stroke order matter? And it has to do with handwriting, both your own and other people's. If you're trying to develop good, clear handwriting in Japanese, this is the stroke order the Japanese people have been using for over 1,000 years.
Oh, sorry, I was going to
Yeah.
tag team what you were saying.
Okay.
I'll let you finish
So that's part of it, is just that, you're following the traditional order, and that affects handwriting. When you write it slowly, hopefully you can have it come out nice and neat like that, so it's very clear and easy for everyone to read. What happens when you start to speed up?
Gets messy.
Yeah, and it runs the lines together, which is the Japanese equivalent of cursive. And look what happens when you start to do that. Here's print, okay? Here's cursive a little bit. This is being a little sloppy. I didn't lift my pen all the way. It's getting a little bit more cursive. Oh, sorry, that one started to write the wrong letter. It can get really sloppy. Yeah.
Now, like in English,
Yeah.
cursive is accepted more or less.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we can look at it and still know what it means. Is those more sloppy cursive ones? In Japan, they can look at that and kind of get it.
Native speakers could read that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I kind of tag on to what you were saying about the?
Uh-huh.
My girlfriend's a 4th grade teacher,
Uh-huh.
and she learned how to teach younger kids that learn how to write English for the first time.
Uh-huh.
And her sheets to teach little kids, like to write an A, also had
The
a step,
arrows and
a
the
1
order.
arrow,
Yeah.
2 arrow.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're just learning it like a kindergartner would learn
Yeah.
English.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Japanese kids learn it in this order. They usually have sheets that show like this with like a white 1 here, so that you know that that's your start point and it's the first stroke. And then a white 2 up there and a white 3 over here. Some of the text materials and workbooks out there on the market actually do that for learners. Mostly they're not college textbook materials, they're more like supplemental workbook things that people go out and buy on their own, just to help themselves learn their hiragana or katakana better. It's really useful to do that. And since the rule of thumb is generally left to right and top to bottom, our textbook, which just shows stroke, stroke, stroke like that, you can still kind of figure out, even though they're not giving you arrows, unfortunately, in our workbook, they are giving you this, this, this. So and if you remember the left to right, top to bottom thing, then you can kind of gather that, okay, this one goes this way, then this one, then that one.
It feels pretty natural that way too, like
Yeah.
when you do it out of that order.
It feels
It
awkward,
feels weird.
right? Well, and again, if you're a right-handed person, then yeah, that's going to be true, because all of these were developed by what was considered to be the most natural wrist motion and stroke order movement by right-handed Japanese people. Unfortunately, if you're left-handed, none of this was made for you. I'm sorry about that, but there's a distinct prejudice against lefties in Japanese culture. So, yeah.
Like from here?
Yeah, well, everywhere, yeah. There's a distinct prejudice within all of humanity, I guess, because lefties are a minority. But in Japan in particular, they actually tend to retrain kids who are born lefty to make them use their right hand.
Struck.
Yeah.
Yeah, like.
Yeah, so it is just, it's one of those things where, a little kid who is naturally left-handed, they will keep getting the fork or the chopsticks repositioned to their right hand, or the pen repositioned to their right hand until they get the hang of it. And they're never really allowed to be left-handed in a lot of cases. I think that's changing somewhat now, but it is true that left-handedness is not as socially acceptable. Sorry.
When I was a kid.
So, but this also is true. So I have gotten you know, like written letters and postcards from Japanese people, where the lines were run together so much that if I couldn't have read this, I would not have been able to read the letter they wrote me, because almost all of it was this level, not that. So reading people's handwriting is a key reason for knowing the stroke order, because if you know the stroke order, then you can start from here, because that's clearly a starting point, and trace through it and say, okay, yeah, I know what they wrote, right? And also just for the sake of developing your own handwriting to be legible, because if you're doing it in the wrong stroke order, all of those connections where you didn't lift your pen would be in the wrong places. So although you may feel like right now, you might feel like I'm always going to be writing slowly in Japanese, I'm never going to get fast at it. Eventually, if you stick with it, you'll get fast at it. And you'll want to be able to just write without thinking about whether or not you lifted your pen every time you were supposed to. Right? And when you're writing whole words, not just a single letter, it's a lot more likely that your pen stays on the paper at times that it should technically have lifted off. And so that cursive thing just sort of happens naturally with practice. And, you know,
We have those tendencies in English
yeah,
to do that.
it
Just
just,
certain little letters, like
Right.
these combine into a lot of different things.
right, yeah, so it's just natural. Also, this is a foundation stone for what comes later, because these symbols actually evolved from cursivized versions of Chinese characters that were being repurposed for their phonetic value without the attached meaning. And if you're writing the whole character, like, sorry, I'm writing it wrong. This is the whole character that this came from, for example. First of all, it takes a lot longer to write that than that.
What is that? Is that
It is actually the character for peace. And because it's got a meaning attached, the fact that it might have 1,000 years ago been pronounced ah, that's not the only thing associated with it. It was also associated with the meaning piece and other pronunciations that had to do with either the meaning for peace or a Japanese word for peace that existed prior to contact with China. There are all these different possibilities for what you could do with that character. If you're just looking at a whole page full of characters and you don't know which ones are meant to be used for their meaning and pronounced multisyllabically, and which ones are meant to be used for their pure phonetic value and meant to be pronounced as a single kana, how are you supposed to read that document? You know? So that's part of how hiragana evolved in the first place was, okay, let's not try to write a whole character for every phonetic value. Let's have the things that are purely phonetic be a different symbol than the ones that are meaning attached. And so that's how modern Japanese actually is. So you'll see a typical Japanese sentence will have some kanji, some hiragana, some more kanji, some more hiragana. They're interspersed because nouns are very often pure kanji. Grammar particles that indicate parts of speech and things like that are always hiragana, pure phonetics. Verbs are usually a hybrid. Verbs usually have a core, like root word part that's in kanji, but the conjugations have to be phonetic so that you can tell what conjugation you're using, which is something that Chinese didn't have to worry about since they don't conjugate their verbs at all. So they didn't have a system for dealing with that. Japanese had to invent one. So hence, hiragana is essential to Japanese. It's also the way Japanese kindergartners write when they haven't learned any kanji yet.
Kanji's so complicated.
Kanji's fun, but you have to first learn some of it. And we're gonna break it down into little itty bitty pieces that make sense so that you can use those as building blocks. So don't get too scared of it, okay? But my point about why stroke writer matters for hiragana is, besides the reasons I just told you about handwriting and reading other people's writing and the history of it and how it developed, and the fact that it's the most efficient use of wrist action, if you're a righty, at least, you know. The other reason is it's building the foundation stones for how to write kanji, because kanji also have their designated stroke orders, which also follow these same basic principles of left to right, top to bottom, center before two symmetrical sides, enclosure before the innards, you know, and other stroke order rules that apply to kanji in general. And that, you know, we'll learn the specifics of this is the order for writing this kanji when we learn this kanji, and that one when we learn that one. But then over time, you develop a knack for the basic principles of stroke order, so that you can look at, you know, after you've learned a few hundred kanji, you can look at a kanji you've never seen before, and one, recognize components that you do know, so you know how to write those pieces. And two, have a pretty good idea of what the stroke order should be based on general principles that you've already learned from all the other kanji you already know.
Cool.
So, so stroke order matters a lot, and that was a very long-winded answer, but I hope it helped you understand.
Like, for this one, it feels more natural to me to do the same order, just start from the other side with that initial stroke, probably because I'm left-handed.
Aha, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing, you know, and the problem with doing that is if you do that, then look at where your connection ends up versus that. So see how that connection, and that ends up looking very confusing to a native speaker, because they're like, what? You know, because that almost looks like a different character at that point. You know, it's a little bit like if somebody is dyslexic and learning English writing for the first time, and they're getting these two backwards.
Change the whole meaning of a word.
Yeah. I mean, there's a big difference between those. They're
Yeah.
completely separate letters, right? So, you know, if you remember what we were talking about with sa versus chi, I mean, if you're doing the wrong stroke order, you could end up with some really funky looking characters that are illegible.
Or insults.
Yeah, that's a possibility too. Or sometimes things that are a perfectly good word in Japanese and mean something insulting in some other language. That happens often. Yeah, my husband has done double takes occasionally when I said something in Japanese. He's like, what did you just say to me? Because in his language it sounded obscene. And it was a perfectly polite thing in Japanese. So, okay, so having answered that question, let's talk about, so we've got ah, 1, 2, 3, ah. Any questions about how to write ah, now that we've cleared up why stroke order matters? Okay, and I know it's annoying for left-handed people, and I'm sorry about that. There's nothing I can do about it. Okay, E. 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 Ooh. Ooh. Eh. Hi.
These have a lot of razzle-dazzle compared
Yes.
to the ones in the book.
Yes.
Which would you prefer us to do?
Simple.
The ones in the book. Good, that's what you're getting.
Good. Yeah. Keep it simple, especially for now. Yeah. The extra razzle-dazzle, as you put it, is a font styling. It's a little bit like when somebody writes a T with the extra little things like
little
that. You don't write your T's like that, do you?
Not
I
often.
don't either.
Not more, Matt. Or
Does it matter if you put it in the break?
What do you mean?
Like in a sign?
Sa. I
Sa or-
prefer that you use the break.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Sa and ki,
That's the way we were studying it, so.
yeah. I
And
prefer
what else is
those
another one?
forms.
Call is another one that was a little interesting.
Yeah. That hook usually, there's usually a little bit of a hook there, but it doesn't have
Would you prefer it
to
to
be
look
huge.
more like a sideways E? Like the top one looks a little bit more like the sideways E.
It should be more horizontal,
Okay.
whereas E is on a definite
What's the one
slant.
we had? Oh, foo.
Foo.
E.
What's
Oh, foo, okay.
Foo is-
We're gonna talk
we're
about
going down,
foo
yeah.
more when we get to
Oh, it's
it,
in the book.
but that is a more typical handwritten form of foo.
Is that the way that you'd like it to be seen?
Yeah, that's,
Not connected, not the top and the
you
middle.
can connect the two middle pieces if you really want to.
I
That's
haven't seen
okay
it.
too.
I haven't seen it like that.
I didn't see
Yeah.
it look like that.
These two are the more common ones
Okay.
for handwriting. Part of the problem that I have with this book, unfortunately, but it's the best book we've got, is they don't show you a true handwriting form.
It's like a print.
They show you a print font that's fairly close to handwriting, but it's not real handwriting. If you get a chance to look at the resources I've got in the language lab, there's a workbook that actually shows like handwriting style for these. I believe it's the Nakama workbook that shows them.
Okay.
Nakama 1 workbook. So you can look for that and see if that helps too, because handwriting it with a pencil is going to be different, or a pen, than this, which is actually calligraphy brush
Like
style.
On the flashcards, like this would be.
That's a
read.
good Lee, yes.
And down the
That's
bottom, I
very
put
good.
the other kind of
Yeah, the
handwritten
connected
form,
one,
just on the bottom corner, just so I
just so you
visually see
can
both of them.
visually recognize that that's the same,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
So,
about
yeah,
read.
it's good to know that these two,
Don't we? Screwed that up, sorry. Read.
it's good to know that these are the same and these are the same, these are the same. This is the normal handwritten form, but
Read.
this is a cursive form of ri.
Gotcha. Any other ones?
Na is usually separated, but they
didn't see
connect
that.
it, you know.
But you'll accept either.
I'll accept either one, but honestly, I prefer the disconnected versions for now.
If it's easier
we-
lefty,
we
I think, to do
disconnect,
the
yeah.
connected.
Okay,
That was just.
as long as it doesn't stray too far outside the
Yeah.
parameters of what it's supposed to look like.
When I try
because
to break it, it
it
just looks
just-
hideous.
okay.
It's just like, what is
Yeah,
this thing?
as long as you're conscious of trying to make it look like it's supposed to,
I can do that.
I'm happy. But what I don't like is when your one symbol looks too much like something else.
That's what
Yeah,
starts happening when I
that's-
break it.
Yeah, so for example, ka
Sure.
and ya are at different angles and different lengths of line
Sure.
relative to one another. That's really important
What was
distinction
the other one?
to make.
Ne and re?
Ne and red, very
Word-
important.
word-
Yeah.
One's
Ne curls under, red curls out,
me,
and wa.
wa, and then what
And
was?
then me,
Looks a
that's
lot.
new, and that's me.
Me. There was also o.
Ru and ro.
Ru and ro,
Ru
one
and
has the
ro.
curly Q, one doesn't.
No,
Yeah.
o. It's o and.
Oh, the particle,
Oh yeah, the
Oh, and
W.
I
O.
don't look alike.
yeah.
No, there's.
Oh, the
O
O
and
low.
o and re were similar, were they not?
Um,
Oh, there's two. There's
No,
one.
ro, ru, and
O and re.
is the same.
this O,
Ro, ru,
No.
and so.
And re.
okay, let's go,
No?
ahead and work on these in order, and as they come up, ask me, you know? Okay, so we've got, is everybody okay on E?
Yeah.
Okay, O. Okay, one distinction about this one, O, is they make this very angular here. A lot of people make this a rounder curve when they do it. When I draw my O, it looks more like that.
No, it's this one.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Yeah, o and
That's
mu were
okay.
real similar.
Okay.
It was o and mu.
O and mu. Oh, mu turns
Sorry, let me yesterday, everybody.
all the other
One
way.
curves up and the other.
All
Yeah,
the
one
way
curves
around.
up, one curves down. It's like, that's the only real difference.
Yeah, this one, yeah, goes under. and back up again. This one
And the
goes
pole goes
over the
over.
top. Yeah, so, yeah, you guys are, you're doing a good job. You're pointing out comparisons that I hadn't thought of. Not everybody sees the O and mu as looking alike, but if that's something that stood out to you as, whoa, those are alike, then that's an important,
Sometimes I know
comparison to
the
make.
vowel, like the consonant is different, but the vowel, the structure of the symbol is real similar.
yeah. So, yeah, and those
Like
structural
that, yeah.
similarities, that's one of the ways that I recommend studying is actually by taking your physical flashcards and grouping them by the ones that look similar to you, even if nobody else sees it. The ones that you think look similar, group them, and then really pay attention to, okay, how do I differentiate between them?
Our
Yeah.
mnemonics are connected to each other by
Okay,
what
yeah.
they look like and what
So-
they sounds like.
So any questions about O?
Oh,
We're good so far? Okay, so here's
ka.
ka, so that's ka, 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 right? Ki,
Key.
Key. Ki, 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 and that's where, we would normally break it here.
Break it and then do a,
Yeah, there's usually a gap from, say, around here to here for this one. Okay, see how my key looks when I write it?
See, when he looks like this, it's easier for me to remember though, because if you look at it funny, it actually kind of does look like a key.
Look, yeah, kind of looks like a key for a lock. So if that works for you, great. As long as you can still write it so it looks like it's supposed to. Okay, that's the main, for me, the main criteria about when you're choosing a style of writing your hiragana, make it come out legible. That's my main criteria. If I'm having a hard time telling whether you meant key or something else, that's a problem. If I can easily read your handwriting, you're golden. Okay? Ku. Ku is just, such and such is less than such and such, right?
Half a
Yeah.
K.
Yeah, or half a K, yeah. That's one way some people like to remember it, because it is a ku. Yeah, so half a K. Ke,
Ke.
you do the vertical first, then the horizontal, then the vertical that's got a curve. Ko, top line, bottom line. Sa, same deal here. If you want to break it, you may. Okay. Shi,
She.
okay, just like a fish hook. Su, horizontal, then the vertical with the curly Q. Se, this is the one that breaks the rule. It goes there before there. And this hook does not have to be so extreme. Some people do not do much of a hook there at all. You do, however, need this bent line to be a bent line that comes all the way across to here. Okay, it needs to actually come at least to below where this one ended. Okay, because if you end that too early, it ends up looking like something else entirely. Okay, so remember this one can have the Z style top or the Y style top that I showed you guys last time. So that's the alternate form of so. And again, whichever one you personally find you can write more easily and have it look right is fine by me. For me, this so is so much easier to form, and the other one just doesn't come out pretty, no matter how hard I try. And for some people, it's the opposite. So, ta, notice that this part is kind of like a slanted cross, and then it's like a miniature kohl underneath the awning, if you consider that like an awning, okay?
It's underneath it, huh?
Yeah, it's underneath, not out to the side. See the juxtaposition here? See the placement? Some people draw this top line a little bit longer so it's more clearly underneath, but even if you keep it short, the piece that's like a kohl should be under, not next to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we did it right.
Ta.
Ta.
Okay, that's ta. Chi, here's our reverse image of sa, right?
This one doesn't get the break.
It does not get a break, and it's a little bit more vertical on its vertical line, whereas the sa is definitely more of an angle. Okay, and this is very clearly a horizontal and a vertical, as opposed to two 45-degree angles for sa. Okay, su, or tsunami, it kind of looks like a wave, doesn't it?
Oh,
And it's the su in tsunami. Tsunami is a Japanese word. That's one of the words that English borrowed from Japanese. Tsunami, yeah. We don't usually pronounce it right in English, but yeah, most people just give it an S sound, but the T is there in the English spelling of it. Tsunami.
They just say
Okay.
it's silent.
Yeah, yeah. They call it a silent T. We call it a pronounced T. Tsunami. Okay, so here's te. Just all one piece. It doesn't actually stop or break anywhere. You do want this to be fairly close to the horizontal, not too much of a slant, and you want this to be a nice deep curve. Okay, to. This can be either vertical or slightly slanted, and this part should also be a nice deep curve. To. To.
to.
Okay, na, we talked about this part is very similar to ta, right? And then this line is a little bit like the broken off line on an o or a ka. It's very similar to that, and it usually is disconnected in print, handwritten print, and then you've got the curly Q last. So this is a more common way to see na written when people are writing with pencil. The connected one can get sloppy very easily, at least for right-handed people. Yeah. Okay, ni, you've got very clearly vertical, and then again, you've got a ko, right? Slightly smaller than a standalone ko. Make sure there's not too much of a gap between the three lines here,
Because then it might
especially
look like-
down here, because then it
Might
might
look
look
like ko.
like a really sloppy shi and a ko. And you're not trying to write shiko, you're trying to write ni, right? So, nu, we want to make sure these are both at angles, not straight, up and down, and then make sure you get that curly Q on the bottom. Okay, that's nu. Net, this is usually a separate vertical, and then it doesn't connect usually, and then you do the Z shape into the curly Q. So this hook here is a stylistic thing that is not normally written that way. Net usually looks like that.
In the book, it's like that.
Yeah. Okay, so I may have to at some point go in and change the font on some of these that are just a little bit too extreme. Okay, no
Nope.
is pretty straightforward, right? Okay, are we ready to move on? Oh, let's do one run through out of order just to make sure everybody's on the same page with me.
Chi.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh.
Right.
ne,
Ne.
na,
No.
Na.
te,
Te.
No.
No.
Right.
ta,
All right.
Sa.
Right.
Chi.
All right.
U.
Right.
A.
to,
Right.
ka,
Right.
Se.
Right.
So.
Right.
Ku.
Right.
Su.
Right.
Su.
Right.
E.
Right.
ni,
Knee. Yes.
Ni.
Yes. Knee, like your knee.
Nu.
nu,
Nu.
Ko.
ki,
Ki.
Ke.
i,
E. Yeah, some people even use knee as the mnemonic for the symbol knee because it's like outlining the top and bottom of your kneecap and then one side of your leg.
Got it.
So some people like that mnemonic for knee. Okay, so this one is ha. Okay, like somebody laughing, ha ha ha. Okay, and it goes like that. So it's the same vertical start like a ke, same second line as a ke, third line goes into a curlicue instead of just a slightly curved vertical. So some people get ke and ha confused, but this, very
Curlicue.
clearly. What's that?
Little curlicue at the
The
bottom.
curlicue helps make it clear which one's which, right? So that's ha. Here we have he,
He.
which looks sort of like a horseshoe. And the way I memorized it was because hihin is the onomatopoeia for a horse's neigh in Japanese. So, and it looks like a horseshoe.
I don't know what horses they've got that go hee-hee.
Hihin. Hey, it's just as close as neigh, right? I don't know many humans who can reproduce that sound exactly. So anyway, that's a he. Okay. Who, this is a very stylized version.
Wait, what?
Yeah. This is what I was talking about before with connections. They actually did this and then they did that. They connected these two lines.
Drunk?
That is a
Draw.
calligraphy style. It really is.
Food.
That is who. Notice that it is halfway between an F and an H sound, okay? Who, who. It's like you keep your lips in an H position, but try to say F. Who. Yeah, so it's more aspirated. You're blowing more air than with an H. Who.
Mine works fine.
Yeah. So hahi hu he ho. It's the only F sound in Japanese until you get into katakana where they have some made-up sounds. They actually recombined different symbols to make some of the sounds that they borrowed from other languages that they didn't have natively. So the hu is the only native to Japanese F sound, but then they've kind of come up with other ways to spell fa, fi, fe, and fo using fu combinations in katakana. They don't do them very often in hiragana though, so we'll talk about that more in second chapter. So this is he, this is
Ho.
ho. And again, it starts off like you're going to do a ha, but it's got two horizontal lines rather, and this vertical stops short of cutting through the top line. It starts as at the meeting point of the top line and goes through the other line. Please do not let it cut through up here. Okay, that's important. So that's ho. And you'll see why. Look at that,
Yeah.
ma. Okay, so that's ho. So we're going to run through the H's together real quick before we go on to ma. But yeah, you can see very clearly why you don't want to let it cut through when it's not supposed to cut through. That's also one of the rules of thumb with kanji as well as with hiragana and katakana. Lines either stop like that or they do like that. They should not do like that.
Either commit
That's-
or don't.
Yeah, either you stop or you cut through,
Right.
but don't cut through just a teeny little bit so people can't tell whether you meant to cut through or not.
It's kind
Okay?
of like making a TNF.
Yeah, yeah, so if it's supposed to stop like this, your other alternative is to have a small gap. If your pen control isn't good enough to keep you from doing that, stop there instead.
Because it'll still be clear to the reader.
It'll be clear
what
to
you
the reader
intended.
that this means this, as opposed to that.
Gotcha.
Is
Okay.
having the gap common? Or
Yeah,
is it-
the very slight gap is very common, yeah.
Okay.
That's a common handwriting foible that a lot of people share, so. Okay, so that's
Ha.
ha,
He.
he,
Who.
Who.
he,
Ho.
ho.
He. Ho.
Who.
Who.
Ha.
He. Ha.
He.
He. Ha.
Who.
And,
Ho.
Ho.
all right, we're ready to scramble them a little more? ha,
Everything
he,
else is H.
hu, he, ho. The
Hu.
rest of them are regular H's.
Who,
Hu, yeah, hu. So this one is
O.
o,
Na.
na,
na,
No.
no,
no,
sa,
sa,
u,
To.
to,
to,
se,
se,
ku,
ku,
su,
su,
Ni.
ni,
Ko.
ko,
Ke.
ke,
He.
hi,
Ha.
ha,
Chi.
chi,
Fu.
fu,
Ne.
ne,
te,
Ta.
ta,
Shi.
shi,
A.
ka,
so,
Su.
yeah, make sure you're pronouncing this as Sue and not Sue. That's important. Sue and
Nu.
new. Yep.
Ki. E.
E.
He. Ho.
Ho. All right. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. Let's move on. So ho was the last one. Okay. Here's ma, and here again we have horizontal, horizontal, then the vertical into the curly Q. And again, if you were to not let this cut through sufficiently, it would look like you meant to write a hole and you forgot your vertical line, your side line. Okay, so that's ma. Okay, next one is mi, and it does, this whole thing is all one piece, and then the cross piece. Okay, so this counts as technically a two-stroke character. Make sure you do get this piece on it at the front. That is not just a flourish, that's a real line. Okay, so it's
it's
a,
like it,
it's a bent line into a curly Q with a long tail to it,
okay.
and then the horizontal piece, or the vertical piece rather. So, and some people write their mi a little bit higher, and some people write it a little bit lower. So there's some variation there, and those are fine to have it a little bit more or less on either side of that sort of central line that they're showing you. Okay, so that's mi. Mu, some people think that this looks a little bit like a cow. And most of the time, this line here is a separated piece. This is, again, a calligraphy style, but that's a more typical mu right there.
Yeah,
Okay? So if that's confusing, you know, that might be one of the ones that I need to change to a different font.
like an egg.
Yeah. So, okay, yeah. With that connected one, some people say that they see the horns here, the cow's face here, the body, and a tail with that one. I don't know. That's just, you know, that's the mnemonic that some people use for mu, just because it's mu. But Japanese cows actually say mo anyway, so. Yeah, all the onomatopoeias are different depending on the language. It's very interesting.
It's funny.
Yeah. I like the Japanese rooster, kokekoko.
Ghetto,
Yeah.
ghetto.
Gero gero, yeah. And cats are nya nya. And dogs are fun, one.
Meh.
Mess, meh, yes. So this is 1, 2. You'll notice a distinct similarity to new, but without the curly Q. Okay, so new has the curly Q, meh does not. Okay, mo also breaks its own rules as far as stroke order is concerned, because it actually does the vertical first, like a she, and then cross piece. And again, this is cursivized, they connected it here, but a lot of people draw it with, I'm running out of space over there, so come over here. A lot of people draw it with 2 distinct lines like this. This is more of a handwriting print form versus cursive. This is more cursive like that.
Nope.
Yeah, so this is more what I'm looking for now. Okay? Yeah, I'm not expecting you guys to connect it like that. Okay, that's a very stylized bowl. Okay, ya, again, very stylized, but we're gonna go back to molt for a minute and do our review before we go on. So this is
Ma.
ma, mi, mu, me, mo,
Moo.
Me.
Me.
Ma. Me.
mi,
Mo.
mo.
Moo. Me.
Okay, any questions about those guys? Okay, we're gonna have some more fun.
Must be fun shuffling all those.
Yeah, well, as you can see, we made them to be for a classroom, so that the back row has no excuse.
But you could just randomize your pages.
I wish I could, I don't know how to do that in PowerPoint. Do you know how?
Might be possible.
I asked a tech person and she said she'd never heard of any way to do that, so. She-
Randomize pages.
Make
Yeah.
a randomized page PowerPoint.
Gotta be.
yeah.
Can you just go on there and just select random ones? and
Yeah,
click
just
all
do
that?
that. And just make like 5 or 6 different.
I got you. I'll come up with a solution for you. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, 'cause I would require probably making multiple PowerPoints and then I'd be
Yeah.
having
Oh,
to
it's
switch back.
Okay.
It's
I was just
PowerPoint.
thinking there are file images you can just open up.
Oh,
random ones.
yeah. And I actually typed this. The-
Oh.
Oh,
No.
No. Ooh. Say.
Me.
Me.
He. Fu.
yes.
She.
She.
So.
New.
New.
Hey.
Hey. Ma. No. Mo.
Yes,
Mo.
mo,
Mo.
Na.
Na, yep.
Sa.
Sa. Su. Ke. Chi. Ne.
All right.
Ta.
Ta.
To.
To.
Ku.
Ko.
Ka.
E.
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 Ha.
Yep, ha,
Ha.
Me.
Me.
Te.
Te.
Me.
mi,
Ah.
Su. Ki.
mi.
Ho. Mu.
All right. You guys are good. Okay, you ready? Next, we have
Ya.
ya. And again, very stylized. These two straighter lines tend to be broken, not all connected like that. So you can see, this is the way I typically write it. My short line usually does cut through. Some people do write it so that the short line doesn't really cut through.
The book doesn't even have them touching.
Yeah, and that is one of those oddball style things that I've seen all three versions
It doesn't make a
among
difference.
Japanese
There's nothing
native
that it's similar
speakers.
to.
Yeah. There's, as long as you're getting your angle right for this piece, whether you're doing like that, or like that, they're all legibly ya. The key to getting this right is don't let it come over here, because then it looks like ka.
Gotcha.
Okay? You see how if you turned this whole thing the wrong way, you could end up with something looking like ka. And I do occasionally get somebody whose handwriting gets sloppy on this end, and they drag this down too far, make this too short, and angle the whole thing the wrong direction. And they end up with a ya that looks like ka. So don't do that, okay? Eddie?
I'm just gonna say, like, this one looks like someone hitting a snake with a cane.
Okay.
It's like, random thought, but like.
Yeah. Okay, so if that helps you, like, yeah,
Yeah,
hitting
that's what I
the
was thinking
snake. If that helps you remember it, great. Okay, so that's ya. You. We skipped
You.
something, didn't we?
We skipped
Yeah.
Yi. There is no yi in modern Japanese. Isn't that interesting? Okay, there is a you, and it goes like this, and like this. And here again, this one pulls it all the way through like that. A lot of people write it like that. Okay?
Big old vertical line, you got
And there's variation, that was a little bit too long, but these variations all exist.
Okay.
So anywhere from here to here, again, as long as you're clearly making it you and not letting it look like something else. Okay, so that's you, which means hot water. So if you've ever seen a picture of the entrance to a Japanese bathhouse, sometimes they'll have a noren, one of those split curtains that just marks off the top half of a doorway. Sometimes they'll have one of those with a great big U on it, because it means hot water. So it's like a traditional bathhouse sign.
So YU also means hot water.
Yeah, U.
Saying
Yes.
U, am I saying hot water, or does
Yes.
the symbol means both?
This symbol is also the word for hot water. So this is the letter U, and it also happens to be the word U, which means hot water.
Got it.
Okay, so just like English has some words that are single letters, like I,
T.
yeah. Yeah, or T, which sounds like the letter T, but it's spelled T-E-A.
Right.
Yeah, or T-E-E.
But I would mean
Yeah,
something.
but I means something, and it's also a single letter,
Cool.
right? U is a single letter that also means something, and there are a number of those in Japanese. Okay, so that's U. And then again, we're going to skip ye. There's no ye in Japanese, but there is a yo. And
Yo.
here, again, it kind of breaks the stroke order rule a little bit, because you write this short line first, and then the vertical into the curlicue. Okay? Don't know why, you just do. And that's yo. Okay? And those are the only 3 Y sounds in Japanese, just ya, you, yo. And we're getting very close to the end of the basic 46, which is the basic part of hiragana. And then we're going to get into the diacritical marks and combos. So this is
Ya.
ya. This is
You.
This is
Yo.
yo. Okay.
You. Yo. Ya.
It's hard to shuffle when you've only got 3. So we're going to do another round of this. Yeah.
You know, you can scan like the things. I had this exact classroom
Yeah.
last semester for
Uh-huh.
speech. You can just take pictures like that. It's like a camera.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easier to shuffle like a smaller,
Oh, there's
like
a nice,
like take
interesting
these
idea.
flashcards, put them under
Put
the
them
thing,
under there and shuffle those.
and
Yeah.
I'll see it clearly and it goes fast.
Huh. I'll think
Just-
about that.
Just
Yeah.
here, spitballing.
Ooh.
He.
He,
So.
ma,
Sa.
sa,
Chi.
Not
to,
seeing some people
Ka.
writing themselves.
Ha.
ha, mi, ki, mu, yo, o, se, hu, he, mo, su, ta, ko, i, te, su,
Sue, not Sue. Yeah, very important.
Yo.
You. Yeah.
No.
Ni.
Me. Yeah.
she,
Nu.
nu,
Right.
Nah.
Yeah.
ke,
Ne.
ne,
Ku.
ku,
E.
me,
Right.
ho, ya.
All right. Okay, we've only got a few left before we get into the combos and diacritical marks. So this is da, and here again, they connect it, but most people write this as one line, sometimes with a little bit of a hook, but not necessarily. And then starting about here is the rest of the letter. So
Looks like a 5.
yeah, it looks like a 5 that's sort of broken. So a lot of people write it like that. It's even more of a broken 5.
And then there's like a, say it again,
La,
la,
la. It is halfway between your L and your R. Okay?
ra,
Yeah.
ra,
La, la. If,
Ra.
think about where you put your mouth For a la,
La.
okay, where's your tongue when you say la?
Against the.
Against your
la.
top teeth, right?
Yeah, your
La,
top teeth,
it's
yeah.
right up there.
Mhm.
Ra, it's rolled further back, right?
Kind
Ra,
of pushing against.
kind of up against your hard palate a little bit.
Kind of like rolling your tongue.
Kind of like rolling your tongue. Split the difference. Put your tongue at
Ra.
the place where your teeth and gums meet on top, or a little bit behind that. La,
Ra.
la.
Ra.
Yeah,
La.
not all the way to where a da would be, because that's a little further back,
Da.
right?
Da.
Da
Da.
and la, they're close to each other.
Correct.
La, da, la, da, la di da. Okay, so that's la. So all of the Japanese R's are in that spot. Okay, so what they call a Japanese R is softer than an English R, but not quite as soft as an L. But it's probably closer to L than it is to R. So why they represent it with an R all the time, I couldn't tell you. La, la,
It's like rolling your tongue for like a half second.
Yeah.
yeah, la.
Ra.
Okay, so that's la.
Am I doing too much?
Okay, you ready? La. Li.
Ri.
Okay, and here again, this whole connection piece is usually left out. It's usually just two sort of parallel vertical lines, and then the second one does curve under as it goes down. Li. Yeah, so this is more typical li.
Ra and E look the same. We split them.
Oh, this li and e, very important distinction between
The right
two.
line on E is shorter than the
Yes.
left, and on E it's
Yeah.
longer.
Okay, first of all, and this is a bad looking E, because it should be a little bit more curved. This should be a little bit more curved,
It's kind of like the
and
flip.
this, and these, it's not vertical, it's about a 45 degree slant. Li is vertical until you get down lower and it starts to curve under a little. Okay, does that make sense? And this is shorter, longer. This is longer, shorter. That's also important. Okay, so E, the left-hand one is longer, the second one is short. Okay, Li, the first one is short, the second one is long. Please do not draw your E's like that, because that just looks like a messy Li. Okay? Every semester I usually get at least one person who makes their short line on their E too long. And then it looks like a V, and I have to keep reminding them, don't make your E look like V. It also helps if you keep the angle versus the vertical.
Is this RL sound, is that some of the reason why when you hear a Japanese accent pronouncing English, they kind
L's
of
and R's?
blend those a little
That's,
bit?
yeah, that's exactly why they blend those. English.
Yeah,
Yes.
oh, I don't want to say it, but.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel sorry for Japanese people who have to talk about things like flowers. Because if it's got an L and an R in the same word, it's so hard for them to say.
I think it's adorable.
Yeah. So that's the. And Japanese is not the only language that has this. There are a number of languages that don't make the same clear distinction between L and R that English does. And they all have that same issue if they're learning English as a second language. Okay. Lu.
Ooh,
Yeah.
ooh.
And notice that Lu has the curly Q. Okay? And again, it starts off kind of like the top of the Z-shaped so, and then it goes into this very round
Like
curve
that.
into a curly Q. Lu.
Kind of looks like the number 3.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a number 3, but you want the top half to be very angular and the bottom half to be very round. Okay, so Lu. And some people with the curly Q, they let the tail cut through, and that's okay to do.
Cut that tail
That
right,
one-
right on through.
Yeah, the tail is allowed to cut through, yes. Yeah, a little curly Q like a pig's tail. Lu. Okay, here's le.
Right,
And
right.
again, just like with ne, It's normally a standalone vertical, and then the Z shape sort of crosses over it a little bit, and then it comes out like that, sorry. So that's the deck.
So there is no hook on it.
Yeah, this usually does not hook and does not connect there. So that's the deck. Okay, and then Ro looks a lot like Ru, only no curly Q. So I came up with a silly little rhyme that helped me when I first started learning it. Ru has the curly Q, Ro has no curly Q. And that was the way I remembered them, because Ro rhymes with no, and Ru has the curly Q. Yeah. So that was the only way I could remember it for probably the first month after I learned hiragana. I had to just say that in my head every time I wanted to write either Ru or Ro. Okay, so that's Rari, Ru, Re, Ro. So that is all of the bar symbols. So this is Ra, Ri, Ru, Re, Ro. Okay, let's try Re, Ro, Ra, Ri, Ru. Okay, and now we're gonna mix them together. Here we go.
Is there really 46?
Almost. We're 3 short. We've got 3 more new ones, and then after that, it's all going to be familiar-looking symbols with a little piece added.
Really, really.
Yeah, the quotation marks in the circle. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So this one is
U,
U,
Ma,
Ma,
Ka,
Ka,
Ki,
Ki,
O,
O,
He,
He,
Ta,
Ta,
Te,
Te, Ro,
Nu,
Nu,
Ne,
Ne,
Me,
Men. All right.
Ya,
Ya,
Ra,
La,
Ra,
Ru,
So,
So,
Sa,
Chi,
Chi,
Ha,
Ha,
Mu,
Mu,
Se,
Se,
Mo,
Mo,
Ko,
Ko,
Su,
Su,
Ni,
Ni,
Na,
Na,
Ku,
A,
A,
Ri,
Ri,
Sa,
Sa,
To,
To,
Mi,
Mi, Yo,
Hu,
Su,
Su,
I,
I,
Ro,
Yo,
Yo,
Yu,
Yu,
Nice.
Shi,
Shi,
Ke,
He,
He, Ho,
Ho,
Re,
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 Hi,
Ro,
Ro. Yes. All right.
Hiro,
Ro. Yes, that's the ro like in hero.
Yeah, Ro, no.
Yeah, hiro, which is a common Japanese name or nickname.
Hiro Nakamura, Nakamura?
Yeah. Yeah, hiro. Yeah, hiro is usually the, like, it's usually a piece of a guy's name. Usually it's like Hiroyuki or something like that, and then he goes by Hiro because that's his nickname, and things like that. And for a girl, it could be Hiroko or Hiromi. Okay, and we have just the last few now. Wa
Wa,
is, again, a vertical, and the separated Z shape into a curve. Notice that this wa, like re and ne, it has the vertical and then the separation. It doesn't usually connect like it's showing there. This is just a curve this way, versus re, which curves the opposite direction, versus ne, which curves kind of like wa, but then goes into a curly Q. So see the comparison there.
Is there a word that
Ne,
uses
re,
all
wa.
3 of those right next to each other?
Hmm?
Is there a word that does all 3 of those that goes next to each other? Like a
Not that I can think.
wana,
Well, ware is a real word.
ware?
Ware is a real word,
What's it
yes. It's actually a very formal, very humble word for the pronoun I.
Oh, instead of,
It's
what is it?
extremely formal. It's rarely used except by politicians.
Is this also the symbol for the word wa?
The particle wa that
Yeah,
you're thinking of,
like
like,
is.
it doesn't actually mean is,
Or
but the
it-
particles
it's-
you're
yeah,
thinking
I know.
of, it's in the position that is in
Yeah,
the sentence. It's actually written with ha. We're gonna talk
Mm.
about that in a minute. Okay, good news, guys. There are only 2 symbols in all of hiragana that have an alternate pronunciation. Only 2. Okay? Think about English and all of our crazy spellings.
You're like, yeah, he uses it, but doesn't use it at all.
Yeah. So, wa.
Wa.
Okay, that's
Wa.
wa.
Like konnichiwa
No,
uses a he.
well,
Hey.
konnichiwa uses the ha.
Yeah, he does use the ha.
It does use the ha, not this wa. But watashi uses the wa. That we just, yeah.
Watashi wa, which is I.
Watashi uses this wa, yes, because that's part of the spelling of a word, it's not a grammar particle.
So you write ha, but it's pronounced wa.
Yeah, but only when it's being used as a grammar structure,
Okay.
grammar particle, which we'll talk about, don't worry.
Not worried about it. Come on.
Okay,
No.
wa. Okay, so here we have wo,
Oh,
which
oh.
is very important. This is often spelled with a W.
Oh.
It's rarely pronounced with the W. It's generally pronounced O, but it is the particle O. This is this is actually the only symbol in the language that only has a grammar use. It doesn't have any other function
So it's
except
not-
grammar.
So it's not part of a word.
It's not part of any word. It's sometimes part of a phrase that we think
Okay.
of as a set phrase that people might learn as a vocabulary word, but really it's technically a phrase. You know, so like kyotsukete is be careful, but it's actually a phrase, it's not a single word, and it uses this o. Okay, so o, this o is an object marker. That's what it does. Okay, it basically goes right after a noun that is the object of your sentence. And it's basically just like a neon sign flashing at you saying, object, object, object. Okay, so it's telling you that's the object of your verb right there.
Is it pronounced still?
Yes, it's pronounced, but it's generally pronounced o, not wo. The exception being a few dialect regions that still have a more archaic pronunciation. So
Okay.
I've run into the occasional individual who says wo in a sentence, but it's very rare because that is an archaic pronunciation. So you'll notice that there's only one W sound in Japanese, wa. Everything else doesn't take a W. Okay, there's no wheat, there's no wet, there's no whoop, and that's the closest we have to wo.
Okay.
Okay, so that's it for the wa column. Okay, and then our final letter is the only standalone consonant in the whole language. Mm. Yes.
Looks like an N.
And it looks like a cursive N, doesn't it? Nice and convenient. How kind of them. It's closer
No,
to
it's
an
an N,
H,
so.
but it's an
an N.
N sound, so you can
It's an
stretch.
N, so
So, yes, and you write it just like a cursive N or H. Okay? And it is the only standalone consonant. So you'll notice that ends of syllables, ends of words, always end in a vowel sound or this. Those are the only options for the end of a vowel, for the end of a syllable.
Japan's got this on lock. Like.
Yeah. Everything's very sort of regimented in this language, kind of like the culture. Okay, so here we have
oh boy.
wa,
Wa. Wa.
wo,
Whoa.
and
Particle.
particle wa.
Wa.
So when it's a particle, it's pronounced wa, even though the letter is ha. And guess what? If you're typing in Word, your computer doesn't have a clue about Japanese grammar. So if you want the particle wa, you actually have to type HA.
Am I going to be typing anything in Word in Japanese for this class?
You don't have to, but you might want to at some point. Okay? And it's actually fairly easy. Okay? The other particle, the only other word in Japanese that is pronounced differently from the way it's spelled is, this is particle e. It's the letter he, it's pronounced e only when it's a particle. This particle doesn't actually come up for us until lesson 3. So you kind of don't have to worry about it right now. Particle wa comes up in chapter 1, so we need to know it now. Okay, so I just went ahead and made flashcards of them because, yes, one of our first vocabulary words, konnichiwa and konbanwa, both take this particle wa because they're both set phrases that we treat as single vocabulary words, but they came from presumably whole sentences at some point in the past that had something else after the particle wa, because particle wa is a topic marker. It's marking usually the first thing in a sentence that is your subject or your topic. And so to just end with wa only occurs in a few instances. It's generally, the phrases konnichiwa, konbanwa, which are good afternoon and good evening. And there are questions like onamae wa, which is really like ending in an ellipsis because it's actually asking onamae wa nan desu ka, which is what is your name? But it's just asking your name.
So like, it's like, you can just like, anate wa,
Yeah, anata wa,
and that's,
and you,
and you,
yeah.
instead
And
of saying anate wa desu ka.
anata wa nan desu ka, or anata wa do desu ka, or whatever the question would have been, because out of context, it's not predictable. There are a bunch of options there.
But if we're already talking about something, you can just
Yeah.
kind of skip all that.
Yeah, you
junk
can
and-
skip all that
and
and
you?
just do, and you?
Yeah, Japanese
Japan,
full
you all-
wide thing.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Sensei wa?
Kind
You
of-
know? Kim-san wa? You know? And what about Kim? You know?
Totally.
Okay, so let's run through all of these before we start doing crazy things to our letters. So this is
Ma.
ma.
He.
He.
Hey,
No.
No.
me,
Me.
ru,
Yes.
ha,
All right.
no, mo,
Mo. Yeah.
Ni.
ni,
Ah.
to,
To.
hu,
Fu.
hu,
Fu.
You.
Yeah. You.
E.
e,
He.
he,
Hi.
N.
There you go.
e,
Particle
e,
E. Hi.
ka,
Ka.
o,
O.
Te.
e,
Yep.
ne,
Ne.
Ra.
Ra.
ra,
Chi.
Chi.
se,
Se.
Su.
Su.
Ku.
hu,
Sa.
sa,
Yo.
yo,
I.
Ke.
ke, re,
Re.
re,
Hi. Re.
o,
O.
wa, wa,
Wa. Hi.
u,
U.
Ki.
Ki.
Ta.
ta,
Nu.
Nu. Hi.
ya,
So.
so,
Mu.
Mu.
Ko.
ko,
Yeah.
Na.
na,
All right.
Ri.
Me. All right.
Mi.
Me.
Su.
Su.
su,
She.
She.
ho,
Ro.
Ro.
ro,
And
wa.
wa.
Nice job.
All right.
That wa stuff me, man.
Yeah. Okay.
It's an easy one, too.
So
It's an easy one, too, man.
now, if you have looked at your chart in your textbook, you've noticed that they've got it divided into the basic 46 and then what they call the diacritical marks and
These are gonna be fun.
the combinations. Okay, so diacritical marks follow a pretty good, easy to learn principle, which is that K's become G's, ka and ga are related
Kaga.
sounds,
Kaga.
kaga,
Kaga.
okay? S's generally become Z's,
That's easy to remember.
yep. T's become D's,
Need to-
ta-da, ta-da, that's related sounds
Ta-da.
too, right, ta-da. And then H's are the only oddball ones, they become B's and P's.
Come back and symbols.
Yeah,
E's and
Okay.
P's.
Batman, yeah, what was that about
What was
Batman?
that? None, none. Keep going, keep going.
Okay, so H, B, P. Okay, I didn't get the Batman reference, but that's okay. Okay, so, is everybody ready? So here we have, oh, and I changed fonts on you.
Oh. Oh, okay.
So this is more, more just straight lines, not all the flourishes and, you know, what was the word you used before?
I don't remember.
Okay, so it's not as, yeah,
Razzle
it's-
dazzle?
yeah, it's not as razzle dazzle. Okay, so this is not ka, but
Da.
ga, right?
Okay.
Gi, gu,
Goo.
ge,
Get.
go.
Go.
All right, you get the idea? Okay,
Second
za,
of
Za. Za.
ji,
G.
zu,
Zoo.
ze,
Ze.
zo.
Zo.
Think of the Z on top.
Da,
Da.
ji. Okay, here's where it gets different, right? Za, ji, zu, ze, zo. She became ji. And now da, ji, zu, de, do. So we've got a little issue. Remember I said there were only a couple of letters where there's an alternate pronunciation? Well, we also have two pairs rather, that overlap, that have the same pronunciation as one another. Good news is, one pair gets used all the time, the other pair hardly ever gets used. Okay, so we've got ji and zu. Those are the commonly used sounds, spellings for those sounds, ji and zu. The chi-ji and the tsu-zu don't get used much. And they actually do call them that to distinguish between them. This is the shi-ji versus the chi-ji. This is the su-zu versus the tsu-zu. But when you're just reading them as part of words, that's ji and zu. The only times these really get used is when they are going along with the chi or the tsu. So for example, chijimu is a real word, suzuku is a real word. Because of that repetition, they use that symbol. Those are the only examples I can think of either one of those letters being used in real life. Okay, everything else is this G and this Z. Okay, and neither one of those vocabulary words come up in this chapter or this semester even, so don't worry about it. Just use these guys.
Cool.
These are basically placeholders in your chart so that you don't have funny gaps in places that you don't need to have funny gaps. You're going to have funny gaps in the ya, yu, yo spots and the wa, blah, 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 o spot, right? But that's it. The rest of your chart is nicely filled in, and then is just the top of its own new line of the chart, basically. Okay, so that's the other G, okay, the other zoo that we don't have to worry about much. And then we go on to de, back to D's again, and do,
Do.
okay. And then we have ba,
Ba.
bi,
Bi.
bu,
Bu.
be,
Be.
bo,
Bo.
and pa,
Pa.
pi,
Pi.
pu,
Pu.
pe,
Pe.
po.
Po.
So you can see that the little circles are the ones that make P sounds, okay? And even the circle has a stroke order to it. It goes around that way. It's counterclockwise. Yeah, it's counterclockwise. And the 10-10, the two little quotation mark shapes, generally it's the top one, the bottom one. And they are also left to right, at an angle. They're like nice 45-degree angle, both of them. Okay, parallel to one another, short, smaller than the extra line on the o or the mu or the ka. They should not be as long. So like even when you're making ga, the two little lines are going to be shorter than this ka line. Make sense? Okay, and that is all the time we've got, and that is also all of the single letters in hiragana. The only thing left to do after that is to combine them into kyaku kyo, shashu sho, jaju jo, all those good combos. So we'll talk about those next class. So keep working on your reading and your writing, and listen to the CDs. If you haven't already read the intro material, please read that, as well as looking at the content for the chapter, so that we're ready to just plow right into Genki, the readings and lesson 1 material on Tuesday, after we've completed the rest of our hiragana, because it won't take the whole class to get through hiragana. Okay? Questions? Yeah, and this time I did get the class recorded, I believe. I don't know what happened last time, it didn't seem to work right. So, this is going to get posted.